At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
In 2012, businessman Alan Warren was elected to the Sacramento City Council representing District 2, a district which includes the neighborhood he grew up in, Del Paso Heights. Since his election, Councilman Warren has been both witness and participant in some of the region's most significant events, ranging from the impact of the recession on Sacramento to the retention of the Sacramento Kings. Councilman Warren joins us today in partnership with the American Leadership Forum to discuss what he's learned since he's become an elected official, Sacramento's future, and his own personal journey from Del Paso Heights to becoming an elected leader. So how's it been so far?
Well, it's been fantastic, but first of all, let me say thank you to my friend. Appreciate being on the show, Scott. So, you know, the last 30 months, started campaigning for approximately a year, and I've been in office about a year and a half now. And the time that we spent campaigning and now as an elected official have been some of the most rewarding times that I can think of in the recent future. And as a novice politician, it's, you know, I mean, it's taught me a lot of things.
What have you learned since being in office that from the outside looking in, you just didn't realize?
Well, you know, I understood because of the nature of what I'd done the previous 20 some odd years that the political machinery is pretty complicated. But until you actually get in and take a look underneath the hood, you really get a chance to see how intricate it is and really why it takes, you know, at times so much time to get things done through the public process.
And does it make you more empathetic with the people that run that process, or less now that you can see it from the inside out?
Well, I think a little of that, you know, but I also see room for improvement, you know, coming from the private sector. You know, where you really value time and efficiency. I think that that a bit of that can transfer over more to the public sector side. But I really do appreciate public employees, appreciate the hard work that they do, and a lot of them also, when you put it in context, they don't necessarily have the traditional private sector experience. And so I have to try to balance out my expectations with the actual work that's getting done.
It's interesting you raise that, because one of the things that is attributed to you is that you're the private sector guy on the council. And so in this whole movement in retaining the Kings and then putting together the arena deal, you've had a bird's eye view as well as been a participant in shaping all that. What's been most interesting to you working on that?
Well, actually, this whole arena process and the whole discussion around the Kings, you know, has been going on for a number of years, and it has been extraordinarily interesting. Obviously, there were some pieces that were in place that really made this opportunity materialized for Sacramento. One, we had, you know, a dynamic mayor who really had some history with the NBA. Also, I think had the ability to pull the new ownership group and a variety of leaders to come together. When I was elected after my election to the council, the mayor asked me to chair the ad hoc committee to really help, you know, decipher through a lot of the information and help make recommendations to try to help my colleagues on the council if they had questions relative to certain aspects of development of the arena. But I think, you know, Scott, when we think about the importance of the Kings, you know, I like to really take a step back and think about the role that's not only, the investment that we're making in Sacramento is significant, but when I go back to my early childhood and I think about the role that sports played, the investment is one very significant aspect of it. But when you think about the role that sports plays in terms of how it has helped people of different backgrounds, cultures come together, and you think about then Jackie Robinson and the Muhammad Ali's and the various other sports figures, Billie Jean King, and how they've transcended sports. So that hadn't been talked about very much in this whole discussion about having a major sports franchise.
And how do you think that's meaningful for us in Sacramento?
Well, here's what I see is that it's a little bit under the surface, but it has a tremendous impact because, we have one of the most diverse cities in the entire country. And in fact, District 2, I believe, is the most diverse district in the city. So effectively, I represent the most diverse district in the entire United States of America. But I think what it does is it gives people a comfortable forum to deal with the varying degrees of differences that we have. And it brings people together and unites them for a common cause. And so the Kings, in a way, does that. Now, we can't underestimate the significant financial impact that this investment is already having and will continue to have in our region because it's going to be, I believe, extraordinary for years to come.
Let's go back to sports. Now, you've had a career as an athlete yourself. What sports meant to you?
Well, I started off playing Little League Baseball in Del Paso Heights, and we would go from baseball to football in the fall. Baseball was kind of a summer sport, then football in the fall, and then through the winter we would play basketball. And that's all I had known growing up as a kid. There was never a break, in between these activities, nor was it widely discussed that we should specialize in any one particular sport. So I had a history, and that gave me, I think, an environment where I met people from different parts of the city, from sometimes different parts of the state, and in different sports. Quickly, what you realize is that teams that have success have continuity. And a lot of times those teams are made up of people of different colors, different religious faiths. But in order to be successful as a team, you have to have continuity. And so you have to have the pieces working together.
Now, you took that later on, and you moved from sports into business and ultimately into real estate development. Tell us about that journey.
Sure. Well, I was one of those young people that aspired to be a professional athlete. Is what we really thought was our destiny.
You're not the only one.
Well, a lot of us, and I grew up playing basketball against the mayor, and baseball. He played baseball as well. But there were a number of fantastic athletes that came out of our community, the Del Paso Heights community. I was a pretty good athlete. Lettered in 3 sports through high school. And ultimately in college, I played, my freshman year in college, most people don't know, I played football and basketball.
Wow, one on top of the other.
Right. And then ultimately, I recognized that baseball was probably the best opportunity for me to have a professional career, but it was also the sport that I loved the most. And so I played 4 years of college baseball, ultimately signed with the New York Yankees, and had a chance to go out and give that a try. And fantastic experience for me. I had some injuries, which are part of the reason why I think I didn't go as far as I might have, but also there were a number of other factors.
Incidentally, just going back to baseball, which was your passion, do you find it interesting that in neighborhoods like the ones you grew up in, that baseball is not as popular today as it was back at the time you were growing up?
Well, if you rewind the clock, the kids today have so many different options and distractions. You know, when we were growing up, there was no iPhone or iPad,
Xbox or
any of that stuff, you know, and in fact, computers, right? I didn't get my first computer until I was a freshman in college. No, actually, I was a junior in college. And it was one of those old, you know, DOS systems,
right,
you know.
with the big disc.
Big disc, you know, and so we didn't have the option of sitting at home and playing video games for hours on end. We were outside playing sports. And I think one of the reasons why particularly urban and inner city kids have gotten away from baseball is because I don't believe baseball has done a good enough job of attracting them and really helping them understand the real opportunities in baseball. And in some cases, I mean, it's a fairly expensive sport. If you're outside of the Little League, the traditional Little Leagues that we had when we grew up, when it cost $10 to play a whole season, and that came with a uniform. You know, now it's much more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, in District 2, Little League had been defunct for, I believe, 7, 8, maybe 10 years.
Really?
And when I got in office, that was one of the first things that we reestablished. So this year, we have approximately 400 kids playing Little League baseball. And undoubtedly, some of those kids will go on, play high school, college, and probably professionally.
So let's come back. So you left baseball, and what happened next?
So when I decided that baseball was not going to be the career that I had hoped that it would be for me, I went back to college. I hadn't graduated from college. And so I went back and I took effectively 2 years of coursework in 1 year. I was extremely motivated, had gotten the highest GPA that I'd had, that I can recall, in fact, from high school through college. So 3+, you know, I think it was around a 3.5 GPA. And I took an average of 20 units a quarter. I was on fire to learn. I recognized that I was getting older. Sports wasn't going to be that career path for me that I had hoped, and I needed to really find my way. I didn't know what I was going to do. Thought I might go to law school. My career counselor said, "Hey, I think you should go to this interview. They're recruiting, and you need to take a test. You know, go for the interview, take a test." And so I did that, and lo and behold, the company offered me a job. That company was Dean Witter Reynolds Financial Services Company, a very substantial Wall Street company at the time. And in fact, there's a movie called The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yes.
Will Smith played a gentleman.
The guy in San Francisco.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through that exact same program.
Really?
Right. So that could, I mean, his story was obviously different than mine, but we went through that same program where they put us in an executive training program. They sent us to New York. You know, we had to pass the Series 7 exam, which is a very difficult exam.
How did you go from that into real estate development, though?
So, you know, part of the journey for me is that, you know, I've always been interested in things. And as a financial advisor, you know, we were doing things like stocks and bonds primarily, and insurance. Basics, you know, stocks, bonds, and insurance. And I would notice on financial statements, because I had to look at an individual or a family's financial statements and then make recommendations to them based on what I thought was appropriate. And then obviously they would decide what they wanted to do. But what I noticed was that real estate played a very significant portion in asset accumulation and in value. And in fact, when most people had made substantial amounts of money, they started putting it in real estate, which was considered to be a pretty conservative investment. And so my family had a piece of property here in Sacramento. My mother called me and said, "Hey, you know, I got this letter. Somebody is saying they want to buy this property and they've offered us, you know, a significant amount of money." And then she called me a couple weeks later or a month and said, "Hey, I got another letter, another company." And so it was in the late 80s. Sacramento market was really picking up steam, real estate market. And I had called my college roommate's father. His name was Ron Moss. He's now deceased, but a very nice man who was very instrumental in me getting into this industry. He said, you know, and they call me Wayne, so my name is Alan Wayne Warren, but they call me Wayne. His son and I were roommates at Cal State Hayward. His son played basketball. White kid, went to Bella Vista High School. He lived in the suburbs. Inner city kid. I went to Grant High School, and so we met in community college, became friends. We went to a 4-year university as roommates. But lo and behold, that relationship translated into, you know, a 25-year career. But the advice he gave me at that time was, if your mother is getting these unsolicited offers for this property, then you should do it. You should take a look at it and develop it yourself. And I will help you.
And when you did that and you started your company, you had this tremendous growth. What project gave you the most satisfaction where you said, you know what, this is it. This is why I'm doing this?
You know, I think my very first project was a project that was called, we named it Creekside. And what I noticed was that, you know, not only did the project, you know, when you perform a project, you look at the profitability, and it was substantial to me at that time. I was 24, 25 years old. So we're looking at 7 figures of income, and I'm saying, this is nice, you know, substantial. But quickly, what also I noticed was that I had the ability to hire people. So I could then employ people from the neighborhood. I could employ subcontractors and then ask them to take a look at hiring some of the, you know, people from the community in which I had grown up in. And that really appealed to me. And it further illustrated the impacts that we could have.
That's typically known as double bottom line type of investment. And you've got not only the work that you've done professionally, but you've also done a lot in terms of philanthropy as well. One of the things that I want to ask you about is you talk a lot about team, about partnership, about reaching across the table. And, and in those years when the company was expanding, you decided to join the American Leadership Forum. Why would you get involved in a sidetrack organization like that? How did that play a role for you?
You know, it was very. In fact, it was a painstaking process, because after hearing that you'd have to sit in these sessions for 6-8 hours, you know, once or twice a month, and it was a year-long program, it really didn't appeal to me from a structural standpoint. My attention span can be short. I need to be engaged. But I think what happened was there were people who had gone through the program that I respected.
And the program, let's just, for base purposes, the program is an organization that brings people who care about leadership and community together. And you're a businessman at this time, a CEO.
Yes.
But at the same time, this is pulling you out toward the community yet again.
Well, I had been very, you know, socially active and responsible and trying to help positively impact my community that I'd grown up in, others. But part of what appealed to me was that this was a situation where we were required to check egos, titles, you know, at the door, and then come be a part of a team that could be about uplifting. And that was very appealing. That is always appealing to me. If somebody wants to really, you know, have an audience with me or a meeting, or if we're talking about doing something positive and uplifting, then I'm interested in those kinds of discussions.
So we go up through the 90s, in the early 2000s, New Phase is growing exponentially. And then the recession hits.
Boom.
Boom, okay? For many of us.
Absolutely.
Okay? How did you work your way through trying to continue to advance, at the same time dealing with what none of us could have imagined was the worst economic climate since the Great Depression?
Well, you know, that was probably one of the most challenging times in most of our lives in terms of our business. And I think it tried us not only from the standpoint of our businesses, but really our character and who we are. I'm a man of faith, as I know that you are. I'm a man of principle. And I've always tried to do the right thing, you know, and so I had those core principles. The economic recession was something we could have not anticipated the depth, you know, of that of fallout and the impacts. The thing that I tried to do was I tried to communicate as effectively as possible with all of the people that were really tied to my business. So banks, vendors, subcontractors. And we were one of the first companies to acknowledge that this market had the kinds of downturn that a lot of people had not known about.
Where in fact, Forbes said that Detroit was a better place to do business.
And that's something.
Than Sacramento.
You know, I wonder if they're saying that now. You know, I mean, I don't know a whole bunch about Detroit, but I'm very bullish on Sacramento, and I think that this is an excellent community, excellent city. But let me say that the thing that really caught a lot of us off guard during the recession is the way that the banks responded to, you know, a lot of their clients in that whole situation. But not only that, there were banks that were collapsing. You know, almost weekly a different bank was going out of business. And so, I mean, a lot of people were afraid. And so I think a lot of people made shortcut decisions that impacted them in a long-term way. One of the things I tried to do, first of all, I knew I had to cut overhead. So I went to my employees and I said, listen, you guys, all this stuff that we got on the wall, all these projects, mind you, I had a staff of about 40 people, very significant payroll. There are people that work for my company that are now leaders in other parts of our region.
Oh, sure.
You know, and very talented people. So they were not, you know, these people were making substantial salaries. So I went to them and I said, listen, I'm going to hold you guys as long as I can. You guys need to try to go and find jobs. It cost me a substantial amount of money to do that, but I did that as best I could. And so we started to pare down our expenses. I thought we were looking at maybe 2 years, you know, to have this thing turn around. It was much longer than that.
But you came out the other side, and today, what's New Phase like today?
Well, New Phase is a very interesting company. We're definitely starting to blossom once again. We have a number of projects in various stages of development. There's a new president at the company. When I decided to run for city council, I went and talked to another, at the time, a friend and a business associate. He agreed to come in as the president, and I became the CEO. But he essentially runs the day-to-day operations. He is also a professor at a university. And so we've done something really, really interesting, and I'm not sure how unique it is, but every year we bring in a group of interns. And this goes back to about 2006. We've continued to bring in interns, talented young people, some of which now are actually working in the White House.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm very proud of that. But so we have 4 or 5 interns in our office at New Phase. We have a small staff of, I think, 6, 7 people. And we also have a number of consultants that work with our company.
Let's turn to, you know, you're sitting on the city council, you're the CEO of your company, and you do all of this philanthropy. How has this impacted the family? Tell us about the family.
You know, my family is, you know, fantastic. My wife, we grew up in the same neighborhood. We went to junior high and high school together, and is a professional in her own right. We have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. Our daughter now graduated, in fact, today. So she'll be in
Congratulations.
She'll be in high school next year. So I'll have two high schoolers and our youngest will be in the 6th grade. But the transition for them was a bit challenging at first because it required us to move from where we had been living, and really a life that they had been accustomed to. You know, my wife's she has a doctorate in clinical pharmacy. You know, I had been a fairly successful businessman, so we lived in places that our kids only knew, you know, were some of the communities that were, you know, pretty nice. And yet my wife and I had grown up in Del Paso Heights, and so we understood that environment. Our kids didn't.
Right. Councilman Warren, what a fascinating story. We're going to have to leave it right there, but appreciate your time and wish you well in your work in building Sacramento in your district.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
All right. And that's our show. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.